Well, good morning. Welcome to the 2025 ROMA Conference. I am so pleased to be here to welcome you to the conference, an event that has grown year over year, both in agenda and attendance. Many of you have traveled across the province to be here, and on behalf of the ROMA board, thank you for taking the time from your busy schedules and your commitments at home to join us. Last year, we celebrated a record number of attendees. This year, we're celebrating another tremendous turnout, plus a record number of delegation requests. Many of you will sit across the table from provincial ministers in delegations to advocate for your community's needs as part of this conference. You'll attend concurrent sessions to learn about the issues that directly affect your community and the residents that you serve. And you'll have the opportunity to share your experiences and understand the experiences of others. That's why this conference is so important. It brings us together to share knowledge and tackle some of the most critical challenges facing our rural municipal governments. This time together highlights the passion we all share, a passion for continuing to build strong, vibrant rural communities. On behalf of the ROMA board, we hope you return home feeling re-energized and motivated with new ideas and solutions. At this point, as municipally elected officials in Ontario, we are halfway through our 4-year term. At times, I'm sure it has felt like you are navigating through the toughest waters. We're all facing unprecedented challenges. Municipalities are on the front lines of issues like housing affordability, homelessness, primary care shortages, and the mental health and addictions crisis. These issues are not municipal responsibilities, but they have fallen into our laps. Many of us are grappling with double-digit tax increases to maintain services and sustain critical infrastructure. This, while we witness upheaval of the federal government and unknown repercussions from the changes of leadership south of the border. What economic impacts will today's U.S. inauguration mean for Canada and to each of our communities? These are times of deep uncertainty. As a fellow elected official, I understand and I empathize with each of you. As leaders, it's time to lean in. We must keep building up our communities. We must keep serving our residents. We must keep believing in the importance of healthy democracy. We must keep supporting each other and stand together as leaders. As municipally elected officials, we have the power to create change from the ground up. Our municipal staff have the skill set to turn ideas into action. While we're busy steering the ship and navigating those rough waters, our dedicated staff are rowing the boat. We work together and we can succeed together. We're privileged to have creative thinkers and leaders on the ROMA board. At AMO's 2024 conference in August, ROMA welcomed 5 new Rural Caucus members. Our Rural Caucus sits at both the AMO and ROMA tables. We're incredibly fortunate to have people who are willing to share their broad municipal experience and diverse viewpoints during important discussions about rural matters. I'd like to thank all the directors on the ROMA board for their commitment to making each of our rural communities stronger. So this is my first conference as ROMA chair. I'm the mayor of the beautiful municipality of Mississippi Mills, which is situated just west of Ottawa in Eastern Ontario. I've served in the community I grew up in for over a decade now. And although I spent many years in other places, home called me back. It turns out you can't take this farm kid out of the country, at least not for long. I grew up on a dairy farm just outside of Almont in Mississippi Mills. And in these times, navigating tough waters, I find myself reflecting on some of what I learned on our farm about adaptability, about resilience, about patience, and managing risk. Farmers possess an unwavering optimism. They don't give up after a bad crop or a tough year. They understand that much like crops grow and seasons change, everything takes time. Technologies and practices may change, but farming still requires the same grit. At the core, what I've always experienced is that the farming community cares deeply about the people around them. And they understand that it takes collective effort to bring food from field to table, season after season. I remember experiencing that deep care from our farming community when our operation was heavily impacted by a devastating fire. I remember helping out our neighbors when they couldn't fill the bulk tank or their silos ran empty. Like the farming community, all our communities work better when we're motivated by a shared purpose and a collaborative spirit. It means looking beyond individual interests to recognize how we're all connected and contributing to the common good. This is the approach that ROMA takes to our advocacy work. Our board recognizes that municipal strength comes from finding that common ground and representing with a united front. As the rural arm of AMO, our efforts must align. We work together to amplify the municipal voice and continue to strengthen cohesion within the municipal sector. For far too long, municipalities have struggled to operate under a broken provincial municipal fiscal framework. The prosperity of our province depends on the well-being of its municipalities and the people our municipalities serve. The current fiscal arrangement is undermining the efforts of our municipal governments to provide services that promote a high standard of living and quality of life for our residents. The Rural Ontario Municipal Association joins AMO in calling for a social and economic prosperity review that would put this framework under a microscope and examine better ways of supporting all our municipalities. Municipal elected officials and our staff are creative thinkers. This is partly out of necessity. Municipalities own and operate $500 billion in public infrastructure and will invest $250 billion in infrastructure over the next decade to support housing, address aging assets, and adapt to climate change. In most rural municipalities, the municipal tax base cannot sustain and maintain this infrastructure. At home in my municipality, our recent master planning estimates project $643 million in needed infrastructure spending in a community of only 15,000 people and an annual repayment limit of $50 million. Contributions from senior orders of government have not kept pace with the true costs of building, an estimated 70% increase over the past 10 years. One-off provincial investments in response to acute challenges are helpful and are appreciated, but they won't solve the problem. Beyond infrastructure realities, municipal councils are expected to pull a rabbit out of our hats to solve problems that are province-wide and don't fall under municipal jurisdiction. Some of you are feeling that one, I can sense. Municipalities are doing what we can to fill these gaps, but we can't make up for a broken fiscal arrangement. It takes creativity and perseverance to operate under so much pressure. ROMA recognizes that municipalities are operating beyond capacity. We see you and we hear you. ROMA's advocacy work is shaped by the needs of the rural communities that we represent. We focus our advocacy on the areas where we can best make meaningful change. In 2025, the board was committed to advocating for small, rural, and northern municipalities to have access to predictable and reliable funding for infrastructure to support their communities and enable growth. Improved access to primary health care and hospitals in rural places is another item we are strongly advocating for, along with solutions to the unique and growing systemic challenges that is homelessness in rural communities. These priorities build on previous advocacy work and research taken on by the board. But remember, everything takes time. Over 500,000 people in rural Ontario are still without a family doctor. Rural emergency rooms are still closing. There were more than 600 emergency room closures in 2023 alone. And since 2016, the number of people experiencing homelessness in rural Ontario has grown by 150%. In Northern Ontario communities, homelessness has risen by 204%. The infrastructure gap is widening, and costs to provide services are rising. Rural municipalities are just trying to keep the lights on. They cannot afford to take on more responsibility. But there are glimmers of hope among these challenging, complex situations. There's excellent work happening on the ground across Ontario. This is a direct result of collaboration between governments, our residents, community organization, and Indigenous friends and neighbors. In the north, the Thunder Bay and Area Food Strategy, a community-led initiative with 9 primary partners, is addressing barriers to food access across the region and during emergencies. In Northumberland County, the Community Paramedicine Program is bringing healthcare services directly to more than 1,000 patients, including non-emergency in-home visits and testing procedures. In my county of Lanark, we have partnered with our local mental health provider and a community-minded landlord in a creative housing project that is transforming the lives of those experiencing chronic homelessness. We see these accomplishments and we celebrate them, but we also don't lose sight of the fact that no one can do this alone. We aren't doing this alone either. ROMA and AMO are a team, and ROMA has called on our provincial colleagues to engage in meaningful discussions. We've invited provincial ministers to come and sit at the ROMA table, talk with us, brainstorm with us, and collaborate with us. These are not one-offs. ROMA regularly engages with ministers to ensure the provincial government understands the rural viewpoints and priorities. Unaffordable housing, emergency room closures, physician shortages, homelessness, none of these problems were created by municipal governments. And the responsibility of solving these problems cannot fall solely onto the shoulders of municipal governments either. And just as we call for partnership with the other orders of government to tackle these challenges, we stand ready to do the same. Rural municipalities and all Ontario municipalities will do our part to help the federal and provincial governments as they work to protect our economies from tariffs and other threats. ROMA is working for a healthy and prosperous Ontario. Let's all commit to helping one another succeed, because we are better together. ROMA's work on broadband continues as well. The province has set tight deadlines to provide high-speed internet to all corners of Ontario this year. This is especially tricky in rural and remote areas where the infrastructure can't support modern broadband, or it simply doesn't exist. Municipalities and internet service providers are also working to meet the government's 2025 broadband goals. Both ROMA and AMO are doing their part to support the municipal sector in navigating negotiations and agreements with service providers. This includes municipal access agreements. Municipalities need agreements that protect them from unfair and unreasonable broadband construction and infrastructure costs. ROMA is doing similar advocacy work related to federally regulated railways. More than 30 municipalities in rural Ontario across the province have been left with millions of dollars in expenses for the installation and upkeep of drains on railway properties. They're not responsible for paying these costs. Cost sharing for these infrastructure projects have been Ontario law for more than a century. Railways are steadfast in their position that they should not have to comply with provincial legislation. ROMA is steadfast in our position that federally regulated industries have a responsibility to pay their fair share for drainage work. We will continue to seek a resolution that leaves rural municipalities in the best possible position and holds railways accountable. This work that we're all doing and the progress we're making matters at all orders of government. The turnout at this very conference reinforces the importance of having a dedicated rural municipal association. Our record-breaking numbers speak for themselves. It says you want to be here for your communities and you care about democracy. It also reminds me of how committed our ROMA board members. They show up in their home communities and they show up for ROMA, for rural Ontario, time and time again. And each and every one of you also shows up for your municipalities, your residents, and for the good of democracy. Earlier, I said that farmers are eternal optimists. They plant seeds without ever knowing if it will rain or if the sun will shine. Democracy can sometimes feel that way. We run for office without ever knowing if we will create real change, but remain committed to believing that we will. That's why we're all here, because we took the risk and we planted the seed. Together, we have the grit to weather any season. And we are the strongest when we speak together with one united voice. In this room and across the province, we stand united for a sustainable, healthy, and prosperous future for rural Ontario. And thank you. And now it is my pleasure to introduce AMO's Director of Finance and Operations, Afshin Majidi, to the stage. Thank you, everyone, and miigwech.